Good evening, distinguished colleagues, guests, and friends. On behalf of Bitlisaniyat International Academy, Dr. Marwan Skran, Professor Yassin Jamal Idrisi, Dr. Samah Haida, entire coordination and technical team, it's my great honor to welcome you all to our international conference, Critical Discourse Analysis from Theory to Practice. In a world started with media narratives and competing ideologies, the tools of critical discourse analysis have never been more vital. They allow us to deconstruct the interact relationship between language, power, and society. To see not just what is said, but how and why it is said, and whose interests it serves. Today, we have assembled a brilliant group of scholars to guide us on this journey. We will begin with Professor Loubna Bouhou, who will lay the foundation principles of critical discourse analysis. Then Professor Laila Laajouli, who will delve into the critical or the crucial role of ideology in discourse. Then Professor Roukaya Khaldaoui will then expand our view, showing how power operates not just through words, but through images and design in multimodal communication. Finally, Professor Nassim Mahfoud will bring these theories to life with a compelling multimodal analysis of media coverage in the Ukrainian, Russia, and Palestinian-Israeli conflicts. Our goal is to bridge the gap between theoretical frameworks and their practical real-world application. We are vastly proud to host this conversation and grateful you have joined us today. Without further delay, let's begin. It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Professor Loubna Bouhou, who will start us with the critical discourse analysis, language, power, and society. Professor Loubna, a deducted PhD researcher at Ibn Tufayl University and English high school teacher. Her work at the Language and Society Research Laboratory focuses on sense taken in discourse. She will provide our essential foundation with her presentation. Please join me in welcoming Professor Bouhou. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Shall we start the PowerPoint presentation?
Here it is.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here with you at this online Bitlisaniyat International Academy conference. Before I begin, I'd like to sincerely thank the organizers for their hard work in making this event possible. This conference is a wonderful opportunity to exchange ideas and share research experiences and learn from one another, especially as PhD students who are still shaping our academic paths. It's always inspiring to connect with colleagues who share the passion for exploring language, communication, and society. Today, I'll be talking about critical discourse analysis, often shortened to CDA, which is critical, of course. In this presentation, I'll introduce the basic ideas of discourse analysis, explain what makes CDA critical, highlight some key figures and theoretical frameworks, and finally pave the way to my colleagues' presentations. So this is the roadmap of my presentation today. I'll start by introducing CDA and its core concepts, then present the major scholars and frameworks, including Fairclough's three-dimensional model. After that, I'll discuss key CDA concepts such as power, ideology, and representation, and show how CDA extends to multimodal analysis. Finally, I'll explain how CDA matters before closing the presentation with references. So, when we talk about discourse, we're not just referring to sentences or words, but to language in its social context, how it constructs meaning, identity, and relationships. The language doesn't only describe reality, it also shapes how we perceive it. So earlier, linguists such as Edward Spear and Benjamin Liebwerf suggested that the structure of a language can influence how its speakers see and interpret the world. This is known as the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis or linguistic determinism. The critical discourse analysis builds on this foundational idea, but moves beyond the individual level. CDA, our critical discourse analysis, argues that discourse not only influences thoughts, but also plays a key role in maintaining social power, dominant ideologies, and institutional control. As Fairclough puts it, language is not a neutral medium, but a means of shaping social reality. This connects directly to CDA central concern, which is understanding how discourse both reflects and constructs the world we live in. Traditional discourse analysis studies how meaning is constructed through language. For instance, how people manage politeness or coherence in talk. But critical discourse analysis, on the other hand, asks a deeper question. How does language help create or maintain relations in society? As Wodak and Meyer put it, CDA critically investigates how social inequality is encoded in discourse through word choice, for example, grammar, or sometimes even silence. So CDA is not just descriptive, it is evaluative and political. It takes a stance on the role of language in shaping justice, dominance, and resistance. So critical discourse analysis is built on several key assumptions. First, language is not just a system of science, it's a form of social action. What we say has real effect in the world. Second, discourse both constructs and reflects reality. The way we talk about gender, about migration or development actually shapes how these concepts exist socially. Third, power is not just only something that governments or institutions have. It's produced and reproduced through everyday communication. Fourth, here we can talk about critical thinking, critical discourse analysis, as has always connected. It always connects to micro level first, which is connecting to specific words, metaphors, and grammar. Also, it also connects to the micro level, which are maybe connecting to ideologies, institutions, and social structures. And finally, the last point is talking about CDA being critical. Which we can talk about the ultimate goal of critical discourse analysis, which is to reveal hidden relations and of domination and to promote social awareness and change. Critical discourse analysis has developed through the work of several key scholars. Norman Fairclough, for example, proposed the three-dimensional model linking text to discursive practice and social practice, a framework that allows us to connect linguistic details with broader social forces. Toyin van Dyke emphasized cognition, on the other hand, how our mental models shaped by media and experience influence how we understand discourse, especially around issues like racism and ideology. Ruth Wodak developed the discourse historical approach, integrating text analysis with social and political history to study issues like nationalism and migration. Theo van Leeuwen focused on how social actors that are people are represented or excluded in discourse. And Gunther Kress and Theo van Leeuwen extended CDA beyond language to include images, color, and layout, what they call multimodal discourse. Their work bridges nicely into Roukaya's presentation on multimodal analysis. Let's talk about Fairclough's three-dimensional model, which is one of CDA's most influential frameworks. The text dimension focuses on language itself, meaning vocabulary, grammar, cohesion, and structure. The discursive practice, on the other hand, a dimension, examines how texts are produced, distributed, and interpreted. For example, how media institutions shape news stories or how audiences understand them. Finally, the social practice dimension, which connects discourse to the wider context of ideology and power. So CDA operates at these three levels, moving from one detailed linguistic description to broader social explanation. Critical discourse analysis uses several analytical concepts to unpack how meaning and ideology work. For example, the first one is power and ideology, which refers to how certain groups or perspectives dominate others through discourse. It is often invisibly. Representation, on the other hand, concerns how people or events are depicted. For instance, are migrants shown as victims or threats? Framing is about how issues are presented, what's emphasized or what's omitted. Intertextuality reminds us that no text exists alone. It draws on other texts, genres, and sometimes even voices. And finally, stance taking, which shows how speakers position themselves and others through language, whether they align or they oppose or distance themselves. For example, if we compare the headline in the example below, migrants flood the border or people seek refuge, both describe the same event, but the choice of words creates completely different emotional and ideological effects. In contemporary communication, language is just one mode among many. We interpret meaning not only through words, but also through images, through color, gestures, typography, and even sound. Kress and Van Leeuwen argue that these modes are socially shaped, meaning that visual choices also express cultural values and ideologies. Think of how news outlets use color, camera angles, or even images of conflict. These elements influence perception as much as language does. So why CDA matters? It matters because it exposes the hidden power structures behind everyday communication. As Fairclough says, to analyze discourse is to analyze power. By examining how texts construct authority, identity, and difference, CDA helps us understand how inequalities are maintained. It also promotes critical literacy, teaching people to question what they read or hear, or to see discourse as a site of struggle, not neutrality, at least. In a world saturated with media and misinformation, CDA provides vital tools for awareness and social responsibility. So, to bring everything together, critical discourse analysis reminds us that language is never just a neutral tool for communication. Every time we speak, every time we write or post something online, we're not just sharing information, we're also shaping how people see the world. Through our words, we express identity, values, and sometimes even power. That's why Norman Fairclough said to analyze discourse is to analyze power. What he meant is that if we really want to understand how power works in society, we have to look at language, because power does not only exist in governments and institutions, it also lives in everyday conversations, maybe media headlines, or even classroom discussions. CDA helps us uncover these hidden meanings, so the ideologies and assumptions that often go unnoticed. So by studying discourse critically, we'll learn to question how things are said, who gets represented, and who might be left out. And that's the real value of CDA. It helps us become more conscious, more critical, and more responsible users of language. Because when we understand how language shapes reality, we can start using it to shape maybe a fairer and a more equal world. I hope this brief overview of critical discourse analysis has helped highlight how language, power, and society are closely connected. And I'd like to thank you all one more time for your attention and interest. Once more, again, express my gratitude to the Bitlisaniyat Academy, International Academy organizers for making this academic exchange possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Bouhou, for that excellent and comprehensive foundation. You have masterfully laid the ground for our entire conference by outlining the essential tools and theories of CDA. You have given us the critical lens through which we can now view the more specialized topics to come. Quickly, let's move to Professor Laila Laajouli, our next speaker, a doctoral student in linguistics at Ibn Tufayl University, specializing in critical discourse analysis. Her research critically examines ideology within educational discourse. She will now deepen our understanding with her talk, Ideology and Discourse, a critical discourse analysis perspective. A warm welcome to Professor Laajouli.
Thank you, Professor Ahmed. Thank you very much. May I see my presentation, please?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Go back to the start. All right, good evening, everyone. First, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Professor Ahmed bin Isa and to Bitlisaniyat International Academy for organizing this insightful conference on critical discourse analysis from theory to practice. I would also like to thank my colleague for her excellent presentation that laid the theoretical groundwork for our discussion today. Now, building on that foundation, my presentation titled Ideology and Discourse, a Critical Discourse Analysis Perspective, will explore how ideology operates within and through language. Specifically, I will begin by unpacking the concept of ideology and showing that it is more than just a set of beliefs. And then I will discuss why the connection between ideology and CDA is central to understanding discourse. After that, I will examine how CDA approaches ideology, focusing on the contributions of Fairclough, Van Dyck, and Wodak. I will then show how CDA reveals ideology in discourse, particularly within educational contexts, before moving to some illustrative examples of how ideology is embedded in different types of texts. And finally, I will conclude by highlighting the broader significance of CDA and its role in uncovering the ideological nature of language. Now, before dwelling into how CDA examines ideology, it's important to clarify what we mean by ideology, because in critical discourse studies, ideology goes far beyond than just a set of beliefs, as is generally known. In everyday language, ideology is often seen as an individual's political or moral stance, but for CDA scholars, ideology is a socially shared system of meanings that helps groups define how the world is and how it should be. Van Dyck, for instance, views ideologies as the basic frameworks of social cognition shared by members of social groups. And this means that ideologies are collective mental models that structure how members of a group interpret events, how they interpret other individuals and themselves as well. For Fairclough, ideologies are representations of aspects of the world which contribute to establishing and maintaining relations of power and domination. In other words, ideologies are not neutral. They serve particular interests and reinforce specific power relations. Similarly, for Ruth Wodak, she defines ideology as socially shared representations constructed and reproduced through discourse. She underscores that ideologies are context-bound, given that they emerge in specific historical and social conditions, and discourse plays a central role in transmitting and transforming them. So in CDA, ideology is best understood as a discursive, social, and cognitive phenomenon. It exists in minds in societies, and in texts. Through discourse, ideologies become normalized and shape what we consider common sense or natural. Now, why does this connection matter? The connection between ideology and critical discourse analysis is foundational, because CDA emerged precisely because traditional linguistic approaches often ignored the ways language is linked to social power and ideology. And drawing from Fairclough's perspective, discourse not only reflects reality, but actively constructs it. And through this process of construction, ideologies are produced, circulated, and reinforced. Van Dijk also highlights that discourse is the key site where ideological control happens, be it in news reports, political speeches, textbooks, or even everyday conversations. CDA's central aim is to investigate how ideologies shape and are shaped by discourse in specific contexts. And therefore, it connects the linguistic level of texts with broader social structures, examining how certain worldviews become dominant or taken for granted. In short, CDA treats language as a social practice where ideology and power are inseparable. And the reason this connection matters is that uncovering ideology within discourse allows us to question the so-called neutrality of language and reveals how discourse maintains inequality. Now that we've established the connection between ideology and CDA, let's look at how CDA actually approaches ideology in analysis. CDA operates on the assumption that language is not a neutral medium, which has been tackled previously. And it is both a product and a producer of ideology. Scholars within CDA have developed different but complementary frameworks for studying this relationship. Now, first, Fairclough focuses on discourse as social practice, and his key contribution is demonstrating that language both shapes and reflects society. It is, we can say that it is simultaneously constitutive and reflective of social relations. Second, we have Van Dijk, who employs a socio-cognitive approach, as Loubna already mentioned, conceptualizing ideology as a shared mental model. And this perspective emphasizes how ideologies function as cognitive frameworks that groups use to interpret and organize social reality. Third, we have Wodak, who advocates for a discourse historical approach that highlights that ideologies always have context and history. This reminds us that discursive practices cannot be understood in isolation from their historical development and social circumstances. And together, these approaches provide complementary frameworks for uncovering how ideology operates through discourse to naturalize particular worldviews and power relations. And now, critical discourse analysis reveals ideology by examining how it is encoded in the structures and strategies of discourse. In, let's say, in what is said, and how it is said, and in what is left unsaid as well. Fairclough emphasizes that ideology is often embedded in linguistic form, in, let's say, word choice, grammatical patterns, and discursive organization. Therefore, CDA works to make those hidden patterns visible by analyzing language at multiple levels. At the textual level, CDA investigates specific linguistic features, such as we have lexicalization, the choice of words that encode value judgment. For instance, calling a group freedom fighters versus rebels signals opposing ideological positions, obviously. And we have transitivity, which has to do with who is presented as the actor or the recipient of actions. For example, a headline like "Teachers Strike Over Pay Dispute" presents teachers as active agents, while if we say students miss classes due to strike actions, this positions students as passive victims, revealing ideological stance through grammar. Now, modality has to do with expressions of certainty or obligation. When we talk about models that we know, like must, should, or may, they're not just simple expressions. They indicate authority. They can indicate evaluation or bias in the speaker's stance. And Fairclough's three-dimensional model helps connect these micro-level features to much, much broader structures of power and belief. Van Dyck complements this with a socio-cognitive perspective, showing how ideology operates through mental models that guide understanding. He identifies several discourse structures that reveal ideological polarization, especially his famous ideological square, which highlights how speakers emphasize positive traits of the in-group and the negative traits of the out-group, which is while de-emphasizing the opposite. And this is where the famous us versus them dichotomy comes. For example, news reports might highlight our nation's brave defense versus their aggression, linguistically constructing self-justifying ideological narratives here. Now, Wodak's discourse historical approach identifies specific discursive strategies that reveal ideology, such as nomination, and, for example, how people or groups are named. For example, immigrants, refugees, illegal, Gen Z, as we've seen recently. And then we have predication, the traits or attributes ascribed to them. For example, when we say hardworking, dangerous, unskilled, etc. And then she introduces the concept of argumentation, which has to do with the reasoning used to justify inclusion or exclusion. These strategies are very powerful because they present particular worldviews as natural or common sense, and thus naturalize ideology. Now here I move to educational discourse. And when I talk about ideology in education, I want to highlight how schools and textbooks function as instruments of ideological reproduction. Drawing on Antonio Gramsci, schools are part of what he calls civil society, which exerts both moral and intellectual influence. And through the daily routines of education, like the many hours that students spend in schools, the exams, the language used in the classroom, school here helps sustain social hegemony, meaning they produce consent to existing power relations. Similarly, Althusser conceptualizes schools as a key ideological state apparatus, and one of the main institutions through which capitalist societies reproduce their values and relations of production. From this perspective, we see that schools are definitely not neutral educational spaces, but deeply and significantly charged ideological ones. In practical terms, this ideology is materialized in textbooks and curricula. As Apple argues, textbooks serve as cultural and ideological tools that embody selective traditions. Let's say privileging certain histories, maybe cultures and worldviews, while marginalizing others. And CDA comes to play, helping us uncover how these ideologies are linguistically realized. It examines representations of self and others, representations of lexical choices and evaluative language that normalize certain cultural assumptions. For instance, the example you see could be from an English textbook used in Moroccan schools. Tom teaches his new friends to be punctual and polite. At first glance, this seems like a moral lesson about good manners, let's say. However, CDA reveals underlying ideological implications. The sentence positions Tom, likely from a Western context given the name, as the moral guide, while his new friends are implicitly less civilized. And this reproduces a cultural hierarchy and perpetuates subtle ethnocentric and colonial discourses. In this way, CDA exposes how everyday educational texts naturalize dominant ideologies and shape learners' perceptions of identity, of culture, and morality. And schools thus become, as Althusser and Gramsci suggest, not only sites of learning, but sites where ideology is taught. It is internalized and sometimes resisted. At this stage of the presentation, I'd like to demonstrate how CDA helps us read between the lines to uncover the ideological work done by language that seems neutral or objective. As Fairclough reminds us, ideologies work most effectively when their workings are least visible. And CDA gives us the analytical tools to make these hidden meanings visible. Let's start with a classic example from media discourse. Protesters clash with police. On the surface, this sentence seems objective, but if we look more closely, the choice of the verb clash, it implies mutual aggression and erases agency. Through transitivity analysis, we notice that the actor responsible for violence is not specified. It could be either group. However, alternative phrasing like police suppress peaceful protesters explicitly assigns agency and power. And this shows how linguistic form can align with dominant institutional ideologies, legitimizing state authority and criminalizing dissent. The second example from educational discourse, as we saw earlier, Tom teaches his new friends to be punctual and polite. Here, the lexical choice teaches positions Tom as a culturally and morally superior. And if we look at it from Van Dijk's sociocognitive framework, it helps us see that this reflects a shared mental model of Western modernity and non-Western inferiority. Meanwhile, Wodak's discourse historical perspective would locate this sentence within a longer intertextual tradition of colonial discourse, portraying Westerners as civilizers. And finally, consider a pedagogical statement, maybe a classroom rule. Good students respect rules and never question their teachers. Again, at first glance, we can say that this statement promotes discipline, but CDA examines how modality, when we say never, and evaluation, like good students, they naturalize obedience and discourage critical engagement. Now, across these examples, we see that ideology operates not only through what is said, but also through what is left unsaid. In short, reading between the lines means questioning how language legitimizes inequality, whether in news reports, textbooks, or classroom talk. Now that we've seen how CDA exposes ideology in discourse, it's important to step back and ask, why does this matter? Well, the broader significance of CDA lies in its commitment not only to linguistic analysis, but also to social critique and transformation. The goal of CDA is to make opaque relations of power and ideology transparent, and therefore bridges the gap between language study and social theory. It provides a framework for uncovering how dominance and inequality are sustained through discourse, whether in politics, media, or education. And by revealing how discourse privileges certain groups or worldviews, CDA empowers individuals and communities to challenge those structures and imagine alternatives. Now, in education specifically, CDA helps learners and teachers develop what Fairclough calls critical language awareness, the ability to recognize how texts position us ideologically. In media studies, it equips citizens to question how narratives about nations, about gender, or about identity are constructed. And in policymaking, it challenges the language that normalizes exclusion or inequality. In sum, CDA matters because it connects the micro level of text with the macro level of society. It reminds us that language is never just about communication. It's about shaping how we think, how we act, and how we relate to power. To conclude, CDA reminds us that language is never neutral. It's a social and an ideological practice. Every word choice, every metaphor, or grammatical structure contributes to constructing a particular version of reality, one that reflects certain intersects or certain interests and silences others. Throughout this presentation, we've seen how ideology is woven into discourse at the textual level, the discursive level, and the social level. Ultimately, CDA calls for critical language awareness, which is the ability to read and interpret text with sensitivity to power, ideology, and representation. So to see language as ideological practice is to recognize that discourse doesn't just describe the world, it creates it. And in becoming aware of that, we gain the power to change it. So thank you so much for your attention, and your questions are most welcome at the end.
Thank you, Professor Laajouli, for that insightful exploration and your rational ideas. You have powerfully demonstrated how ideology is not an abstract concept, but is embedded and naturalized within everyday discourse, especially in education or in educational materials. This really brings the critical in the CDA to the forefront, showing us what we are looking for and why it matters. Now let's move to Professor Roukaya Khaldaoui, who is a PhD researcher at Multimodal University as well. Her work blends critical discourse analysis and media studies with a particular focus on digital communication. She will now expand our perspective by exploring multimodal CDA, integrating Chris and Van Leeuwen's Social Semiotics with CDA. Let's welcome Professor Khaldaoui. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to first thank Bitlisaniyat, Professor Benissa, and the organizers for organizing this event. I would like to also thank my colleagues for their invaluable contributions to this event. So the title of my presentation is Multimodal CDA, Integrating Kress and Van Leeuwen's Social Semiotics with CDA. Let us first start with an outline of what to expect during this presentation. So I will be starting, of course, with an introduction in which I will be answering the question, why study multimodality at all? Then I will move on to multimodal critical discourse analysis. Then I will be talking about social semiotics, the grammar of visual communication as laid by Kress and Van Leeuwen in 1996. This is the theoretical framework on which multimodal critical discourse analysis is based. Then in the fourth section, I will be talking about how CDA and social semiotics integrate or how they merge together. In number 5, I will be addressing the analytical framework that stems or that results from this merging. emerging. In 6, I will be discussing some examples. I have 2 cases that we can use to apply the analytical framework to. And then I will be discussing the power of visual ideology, and of course, I will be concluding with a conclusion. So, in the late 1980s and 1990s, linguists began to realize something crucial. They realized that meaning is generally communicated not through language, but also through other semiotic modes. According to Kress and Van Leuven, 1996, in their book Reading Images, a mode is a semantic resource that people use to create meaning within a culture. For example, spoken and written language, image, sound, gesture, etc. Each mode has its own affordances. That means its own possibilities and limitations for expressing ideas. In our contemporary media landscape, which is dominated by digital platforms, think social media platforms, advertising, and visual culture in general, meaning is rarely communicated through a singular mode alone. Everyday texts combine visual, verbal, and spatial modes to create persuasive messages. So let us quickly consider this powerful example from Tony True's work. So in 1975, when Rhodesian police fired into a crowd of unarmed people and killed 13 of them, the Rhodesia Herald wrote, "A political clash has led to death and injury," while the Tanzanian Daily News wrote, "Rhodesia's white supremacist police opened fire and killed 13 unarmed Africans." Notice how political ideology isn't just encoded through vocabulary, but through grammatical choices. This has already been pointed out by my colleagues before, but think of this as a bonus example. So we see that one version uses nouns, death, injury, highlighted in red, which obscure agency. The other uses verbs, like opened fire and killed, which require active subjects and objects, making clear who did what to whom. We can have the same ideological manipulation from the visual point of view, and we will see more examples of this later. So the central question becomes, how can discourse and discourse analysts account for the ways that visual and linguistic modes together reproduce or challenge power and ideology? This is where multimodal critical discourse analysis comes in. So multimodal critical discourse analysis, or MCDA in short, extends the analytical framework of CDA to include non-linguistic semiotic modes. According to Machin and Mayer, MCDA examines how visual and linguistic choices work together to produce ideological effects. It seeks to reveal how modes such as image composition, color, contrast, camera angle, or even font size contribute to the representation of social actors and relationships and values. Very much like CDA, MCDA is grounded in the assumption that discourse is both constitutive and ideological. It not only reflects, but also reproduces social relations of power and inequality. Now, Fairclough's approach to critical discourse analysis, as previously addressed by my colleagues, focuses on how power and ideology shape written discourse, but offers rather limited tools for analyzing multimodal communication. To address this gap, Kress and Van Leuven developed visual grammar, a framework that helps examine how different modes convey meaning, how they work together to convey meaning. Their work bridges CDA and multimodality through social semiotics, which is the theoretical background or the theoretical framework on which they base their work. So they provide a toolkit for analyzing visual and textual elements together. And so visual grammar treats images as structured systems of meaning, not very different from language. It is governed by rules analogous to linguistic grammar, and through concepts such as representation, interaction, and composition. Kress and Van Leuven demonstrate that visual communication follows systematic principles. So representation explores how people, places, and things are depicted. Interaction examines how viewers are invited to relate to these representations, for instance, through gaze, distance, or perspective. And then composition, which looks at how elements are arranged within the frame to create emphasis and hierarchy. I will talk about all of this in more detail in a minute. So together, these metafunctions mirror Halliday's 1987 linguistic metafunctions, which are ideational, interpersonal, and textual. But they are adapted to the visual mode. So this correspondence or mirroring shows that meaning making extends beyond language, encompassing the visual choices that shape perception and interpretation. So let us now turn to social semiotics. So social semiotics is an approach that examines how people use semiotic resources within social contexts, hence the name social semiotics. This theoretical framework builds on the insights of classical semiotics, of course, which can be traced back to Ferdinand de Saussure, the father of linguistics, and Charles Sanders Peirce. A central concept within semiotics is sign. A concept that we are all very familiar with. So sign is defined by de Saussure as a dyadic structure consisting of the signifier, which can be the sound, the image, or the word, and the signified, which refers to the concept it represents. The relationship between the two is known as signification, and it is arbitrary and depends on historically established conventions. Now, while classical semiotics views meanings of signs as a relatively stable relationship between signifier and signified, social semiotics, on the other hand, inspired by Michael Halliday's systemic functional linguistics, argues that meaning is socially motivated and context dependent. In other words, a meaning does not reside in the sign itself, but emerges from how people use signs for particular purposes in specific social situations. As Kress and Van Leuven note, all modes are semiotic. They are socially shaped and culturally given resources for meaning making. Just as language has grammar, images too have visual grammar that organizes meaning through elements such as composition, framing, color, and gaze. So can we integrate these ideas from social semiotics into CDA? The answer is yes. But before, it is important to note that CDA and social semiotics are not competing paradigms. They are rather complementary perspectives. So CDA gives us the critical and political orientation, the focus on ideology, power, and inequality, while social semiotics gives us the methodological tools, the ability to analyze multiple modes of communication and their affordances. When combined, they form what we call multimodal critical discourse analysis, which is an interdisciplinary framework. Now, let me now outline the practical analytical framework that emerges from this integration. As I previously mentioned, Kress and Van Leuven propose 3 dimensions of analysis. First, the representational dimension asks the following questions. What is depicted? Who or what is included in the frame? And who or what is excluded? Are certain social groups represented repeatedly while others are entirely absent? How are people, places, or events depicted? And are they shown as actors with agency or as passive recipients of action? Second, the interactive dimension examines how viewers are positioned. This is about the relationship constructed between the image and its audience? Is the viewer positioned as an observer looking at subjects or as a participant engaged with them? What relationships are constructed through gaze, angle, and distance? Third, and finally, the compositional dimension. It analyzes how elements are arranged within the image. What is emphasized through size, placement, or visual salience? What's given prominence through being placed on the left, which is given or familiar or already known information, versus the right, which is to say the new information. What is placed in the ideal position of the top versus the real concrete position at the bottom. These three dimensions work together to create a paradigm of meaning. We need to analyze all three to understand how multimodal texts position viewers and construct ideology. So here are concrete examples. So I'd like to demonstrate how this framework works in practice by analyzing two examples, starting with this Newsweek magazine cover about US border control. So let's start with the representational dimension. Let's ask the question of what is depicted. We see a padlock with the American flag, and the heading asks, will America lock its gates? But notice what's missing as well. There are no human subjects whatsoever. No immigrants, no border patrol, no police officers, no families affected by these policies. This is a conceptual representation of a symbolic equation between America, where America equals security. By completely excluding human actors in this picture, the cover transforms a fundamentally human issue, which is migration or immigration, into an abstract security problem, detached from any humanity. So immigration becomes depersonalized, reduced to a question of whether or not to secure a container or the borders. Then let's move on to the interactive dimension. So how does this image position us as viewers? This is an offer image, meaning that we're detached observers examining an object, not emotionally engaged with people. There is a layer of separation between us and the image. The medium distances or the medium distance invites inspection rather than empathy and maintains neutrality. And critically, we're looking down at the lock from a slightly higher angle, positioning us in judgment and control. The interactive dimension positions the presumably American reader as an empowered decision maker, while those who will be locked out or remain absent and voiceless, so the immigrants. We have a relationship with a symbol, not with actual human beings. Now, with the last dimension, which is the compositional dimension, looking at how elements are arranged, we see that the headline occupies the ideal. It's located at the top, so it's an abstract space, while the lock dominates the image. The lock is also maximally salient. It occupies around 60% of the visual space, with stark color, contrast, and dramatic lighting that demands attention. Finally, we notice that there's no internal framing. The flag and the lock form a unified whole. The flag design wraps seamlessly around the lock, visually performing an equation. American identity here equals secured borders equals exclusion, and patriotism and border control become inseparable, almost indistinguishable. So through this initial analysis, we see that this cover naturalizes that security equals closure, excluding alternative narrative or framings like humanitarian obligation or human rights. And second, it fuses American identity with exclusion. The flag literally is the lock. They are inseparable. Third, it completely depersonalizes the human impact by removing all human subjects and positioning us as detached analysts. Now, in the second example, a Soviet space propaganda poster will show us how multimodal choices construct national identity and collective ideology. As usual, starting with the representational dimension, we see two astronauts marked CCCP, which means USSR in Russian, fly through space while a crowd below celebrates, arms raised as if trying to touch or reach the two figures in the sky. The text reads, "Glory to the motherland's heroes." Notice what's absent again. Individual identity this time. The astronauts are identical, interchangeable. The crowd is an undifferentiated mass. People are clumped together. There is no individual identity. This is a narrative with clear vectors or intentions. Astronauts move diagonally upward into the future. People's arms point up towards them, and the representation naturalizes that individual achievement belongs to the collective, to the motherland. The astronauts succeed for the motherland, not for personal glory. As for the interactive dimension, we're looking up at the astronauts from a low angle. They are elevated, heroic, superior. We are positioned with the masses below in admiration. Unlike in the Newsweek cover, where affected people were absent, here we identify with collective pride. The distance creates hierarchy, of course. The astronauts close enough to seem human, far enough to be perceived of as larger than life, while the crowd merges into a mass. That leaves the last dimension, which is the compositional. The diagonal composition moves from lower left, the people, the present, the given, to upper right, space, the future, the new, the promised. This visual vector implicitly suggests inevitable socialist progress. Color is also ideologically loaded in this image. Red dominates it, and it could refer to revolution, Soviet identity. It is famously the color of the flag of the USSR. While blue on the bottom represents the loyal people, and of course black is the space to be conquered. This visual integration of color performs the message that individual and collective are inseparable. Bottom line is the poster performs what it depicts. Just as the astronauts lead masses towards the future, the poster inspires viewers to identify with this collective project. It offers a subject position that's simultaneously subordinate and empowering. You're not the hero, but you're essential to the collective achievement. So as we've seen, visual elements often naturalize ideological positions even more effectively than verbal text, as seen in the two examples. We're trained to read words critically, to question claims, to look for bias in language, but we often accept images as transparent windows to reality rather than constructed representations. This makes visual ideology particularly powerful and particularly important to analyze. Images can reinforce dominant narratives, but they also are capable of challenging them. Think about how social movements use visual communication. For example, the raised fist from the Black Lives Matter movement. These visual forms can contest dominant ideologies. Understanding visual grammar helps us appreciate how resistance operates multimodally, as well as linguistically. Back to the images that we have just seen, they both depersonalize, but in opposite ways, serving opposite ideologies. One erases people to naturalize exclusion. The other multiplies people into masses to naturalize collective identity. Over, of course, individual autonomy. That is the goal. Both, though, make their ideological positions seem natural, inevitable, self-evident, and align with the social or the status quo. Understanding visual grammar enables resistance not just through critique, but through reproduction. When activists educate or communicators understand these principles, they can create counter-hegemonic visual texts or images or designs that challenge rather than reproduce dominant ideologies. In the end, the key insight is that visual communication is never neutral. It always serves particular interests and embodies particular worldviews. The question is, of course, whether we're conscious of this or not, whether we have the tools to analyze it or not, and whether we can use this understanding to create more than just forms of representation. So in conclusion, we've seen that the integration of critical discourse analysis and social semiotics provides a robust methodology and analytical framework. CDA's focus on power and ideology combined with social semiotics' systematic analysis of visual grammar creates a powerful analytical toolkit. I would like to also emphasize that critical multimodal literacy is essential in our digital age and era. And without the tools to analyze content critically, we're vulnerable to ideological manipulation. Looking forward, future research should expand cross-cultural applications of this framework. Much of the work on visual grammar has focused on the Western or Western contexts. We need more research examining how visual meaning making operates across different cultural contexts and settings, and how power dynamics are reproduced or challenged in diverse contexts, among which is the Moroccan one, of course. So I thank you for your attentions, and I welcome any questions. You are muted, Professor Ben Isa.
Thank you, Professor Khaldaoui, for expanding our perspective so effectively, and your presentation was critical, a crucial bridge, showing us that power and ideology are not only conveyed through words, but are orchestrated through images, layout, and color. You have equipped us with the new grammar, new visual grammar for reading the multimodal world around us. Let's move to Professor Nasim Mahfoud. Our final presentation will be presented by Professor Nasim Mahfoud, a doctoral researcher specializing in media studies and multimodal critical discourse analysis at the University of Regina, Canada. His work expertly deconstructs ideological narratives in global news coverage of conflict. He will bring our theories to the practice with his compelling presentation. So the floor is yours, Professor Mahfoud.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Hamad. Thank you so much to the organizers and to everybody participating in this online conference. My work revolves around media construction of wars, a multimodal CDA of media coverage of the Russia, Ukraine, and Palestine-Israel conflicts. So the outline will so my presentation will go through what do we mean by media and the construction of wars, what is the relationship, purpose and significance of my study, the relationship between ideology, power, and representation in conflict coverage, particularly ideology, integrating critical discourse, it is repeated there, integrating critical discourse analysis and multimodality. What do we mean by integrating these two approaches, and the analytical frameworks that I'm adopting in my research. And then I'll move on to talk about the research design and data collection. And finally, I'll cover some of the expected findings. Okay. So in today's world, we know that we live in a mediated world, and our understanding of the world is shaped and created by the media. So our understanding of the world, the question is it 100% accurate? Baudrillard, this is a French cultural theorist and philosopher, he came up with the concept of simulacra. And simulacra means the media representations that has blurred the line and the boundary between what is real and what is symbolic, between reality and fiction. The same line of reasoning is adopted by so many other scholars, including Berger and Lachman, who assert that reality itself is socially constructed. And the same goes with Stuart Hall, who argues that representation is not a mirror. It is not a mirror of reality, but a constitutive process through which meaning is produced. These ideas and similar ideas actually constitute the foundation of my research, which concentrates on in examining and investigating news media and how they use language and visuals to construct narratives of war. And these narratives are often contradictory, conflicting, competing, etc., which ultimately, of course, influence our perception as audiences of who is portrayed and who is the victim, who is the aggressor, who is the occupier, for example, who is the defender, the resistant, etc. Concerning the purpose and significance of the study, the purpose of my study are as follows. First, it tries to expose global media's construction of ideological meanings in war coverage, the ways in which this process is conducted or is done. Second, it focuses on two particular case studies, which are Ukraine, Russia, and Palestine-Israel conflicts. Three, it tries to integrate CDA and framing theory to analyze both text and visuals. Four, and to compare BBC, RT, and Al Jazeera news outlets and how they represent those two conflicts. And finally, it tries to explore how discourse and framing shape our perception and our empathy and the power of the actors in those conflicts. The significance, why this study is significant, because it exposes hidden ideologies in global news. And that relates to what other colleagues talked about, which is media literacy. It also fosters critical media literacy, as I just said, and it bridges linguistic and visual analysis. Most research focus either on the linguistic side of the news or the visual side. But this study tries to bring them together to come up with hopefully innovative and creative insights. Four, it adds a cross-cultural and decolonial perspective. Most research are focused exclusively on Western-centric newsmaking or Western ways of newsmaking, neglecting and ignoring alternative narratives in the rest of the world. And finally, it tries to advance multimodal methods in media studies. Ideology, power, and representation. These are the three of the most essential concepts in both cultural studies and media studies, and even in linguistics. So these ideas that I've listed here form the assumptions, that form or that underlie my research. First, media discourse constructs power relations through language and visuals, and that's what dear colleagues has talked about previously. Second, ideology influences the depiction of wars, which determines the roles of victims, aggressors, and heroes. 3, the coverage of the conflict or the conflicts reflects a polarized perspective. What do I mean by polarized perspective? Is that dichotomic language where us is always put where there is this competition, if I may say so, between the us and the them, the in-group and the other, etc. 4, representations or media representations either reinforce, in the case of BBC, or contest, in the case of RT, Russia Today, these prevailing geopolitical narratives. If you think about the prevailing geopolitical narrative in the world, like 3 years ago, you would, I mean, it's obviously the Western-centric narrative. But now the story is different. And that's due thanks to mainly the media. Finally, power is exercised through the mechanisms of selection and framing. Integrating critical discourse analysis and CDA. What do we mean by that? CDA means the analysis of language per se and the language itself and how it produces and reproduces, and at times it resists ideology and power. CDA extends CDA to include visual analysis, the layout, the color, the composition, the light, etc. And integration then means studying how text and image interact with each other to shape the meaning of reality in general. This will help us reveal how linguistic and visual choices jointly and together construct meaning. It will also enables us to have like a richer, a deeper, a more profound reading of ideological media discourse. If you take the example of an image of a Palestinian child amid a rebel, as you can see, well, this clearly constructs what we call pathos, and pathos is a Greek word that means emotion or suffering. It humanizes suffering. On the other hand, if you take like a photo of a Ukrainian soldier who is waving a flag, that obviously evokes nationalism and resistance. Two different frames. Concerning my analytical frameworks that I'm adopting in my research, the first one is CDA, particularly Van Dijk's sociocognitive approach. It will help me to expose and to uncover ideological meaning in language and reveal this us versus them polarization. How? Well, through 3 phases. The first one, to select text, the one on the right side. To select first, I'm going to select textual data. I mean the headlines, the leads, the paragraphs, etc. from news articles. I'm going to identify key linguistic patterns, the most frequent, for example, the most frequent vocabulary words or vocabulary items like terrorist, defense, etc. Then transitivity, and transitivity here is a word that was introduced by Holiday, as one of the colleagues has mentioned, has highlighted before. And transitivity includes 3 processes. Is basically it talks about the sentence construction, what is the actors, the process, and the circumstances. Then I'll move on to analyze like the modality of the text, be it visual or textual, both of them. So modality here is inclusive. And then I will go through the quotation patterns. I mean, whose voices are amplified, whose are silenced, whose are included, etc. Then I'll move on to apply Van Dijk's ideological square model. This is one of the most influential analytical models advanced by Van Dijk, where he says that in news discourse, we always find find emphasis on our good actions and emphasis on their bad actions. There is mitigation of our bad actions and mitigation of their good actions. Finally, in the interpretation phase, I will try to link these 2 analyses ideologically. In other words, how do these linguistic choices construct us and them? What values are or beliefs are implied in the news articles? The result will help me reveal how language encodes ideological positions and legitimizes or challenges certain actors. The second theoretical framework is framing theory. The framing theory was first introduced by Goffman, the famous sociologist, in the late 70s, and then it was expanded on by Antman and Iyengar and other scholars, specifically in the early 90s, 1993, which is the most cited reference when talking about framing theory. This theory will help me to show how media structure meaning by three processes: selecting, emphasizing, and organizing aspects of reality. How? First, I'm going to identify recurrent frames across my text and visuals. What are is it a victim frame? Is it an aggressor frame? Is it a resistance frame, heroic frame, etc.? Then I'll apply Entman's four framing functions, like problem definition. That's the first phase. What is the issue being emphasized? Second, causal interpretation. Who or what is responsible for this issue? Three, moral evaluation. What moral stance is implied? And four, the treatment recommendation. What action or response is suggested, which is usually missing in news discourse. In the interpretation, the third phase, before going into the interpretation phase, I'll compare frames across the three outlets. And then I will link the results to ideology, which national and or institutional ideologies reflected, triggered in these frames, by these frames. The results will expectedly reveal how framing shapes audience perception and supports different ideological worldviews. The third one is MCDA, adopting Chris and Van Leuven's framework or approach. This approach, or this MCDA, will help me examine how visuals like layout, composition, etc., communicate ideology and emotion. How? Well, I'll select images attached to my articles that were previously analyzed textually before. Then I'll move on to evaluate to use Chris and Van Leuven's three meta functions, as Dr. Khaldaoui talked about, which was inspired from Halliday's framework. Basically, I'm going to go through three phases or three dimensions: the representational dimension, who and what is depicted; an interactive dimension, how does the image engage the viewer, the audience; and the compositional dimension, how are elements arranged, like foregrounding, backgrounding, etc. Then I'll evaluate modality. And as I said, modality here does not mean the textual, it is not restricted only to textual modality, but it's also includes visual modality. If you take the example of a highly saturated image, an image that is highly saturated in color, this sort of images tend to reduce realism, while the opposite is true. And then I'll interpret the findings critically. What ideology or emotional stance does the visual promote? How does it support or contradict textual discourse? All right. The result will expectedly uncover how images work together with text to produce ideological meanings and emotional appeal. The research design and data collection. Methodologically, this is apparently an interpretivist qualitative study grounded in CDA and MCDA traditions. The corpus that I will be using are 90 news articles collected from the three media outlets, 30 from each outlet. The source, of course, I'm going to collect my articles from the official websites to maintain authenticity and contextual integrity. The conflicts covered or focused on are Ukraine-Russia conflict and Palestine-Israel war. Concerning sampling, my study is obviously non-probabilistic because I'm adopting purposive sampling method, because I'm focusing more on critical periods in these two wars, like escalation and ceasefire during the first 5 months of each conflict. The comparative analysis. Al Jazeera and BBC and RT are not similar. Their editorial lines are almost totally different. As you can see, at the ideological position level, Al Jazeera adopts a global South and post-colonial, decolonial stance, while the BBC has a Western liberal stance or perspective and tries to maintain institutional neutrality. Russia Today has like an Eastern perspective and tries to what we call counter-hegemonic or hegemonic anti-Western purposes. In terms of narrative focus, Al Jazeera is more focused on humanitarian suffering, resistance, and justice. BBC tries to maintain more balance, professionalism, and official sourcing. Russia Today, Western hypocrisy. That's what is framed in Russia Today, alternative truth and power critique. Audience appeal. Al Jazeera has, of course, the Arab audience. BBC has the Western audience, mainly the Western audience, and Russia Today, alternative and dissenting publics, who may not necessarily agree with the Western world. Expected findings. This research will likely reveal that Al Jazeera, BBC, and Russia Today construct war narratives shaped by their respective geopolitical ideologies. Al Jazeera may accentuate humanitarian suffering and resistance. The BBC may project an aura of neutrality while reinforcing Western perspectives. And Russia Today may challenge Western dominance through counter-narratives. The analysis will expose that language and visuals jointly naturalize and normalize ideology, unveiling asymmetrical empathy, particularly more pronounced humanization of Ukrainians than Palestinians, in the case of BBC. Overall, the study will demonstrate that media coverage of wars is ideologically constructed rather than neutral, which influences a global audience's perceptions of conflicts. Some suggested references for further readings to the audience, and thank you. The floor. Okay, so I think I'm done. See, Hamid.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Professor Mahfoud, for your powerful and compelling application of CDA and the multimodal analysis. You have taken the theoretical and methodological discussions and shown their profound real-world significance by deconstructing the narratives of contemporary conflicts. This is CDA in practice at its most relevant. Now we would like to open the floor for a broader discussion. We invite questions and comments from our audience for all of our distinguished speakers. I have a question that was sent to me from Professor Al-Mazouzi Jawad, who says, how can CDA frameworks account for the power dynamics embedded not only in discourse content, but also in the very choice of language and code switching practices? I repeat, how can CDA frameworks account for the power dynamics embedded not only in discourse content, but also in the very choice of language and code switching practices?
Okay.
If there is any,
I can attempt to answer this question.
Sure.
So the very nature of critical discourse analysis is, the very purpose of it is to uncover hidden ideologies in language. You can do this by using any of the different analytical frameworks that have been discussed here today. So there's the Kristen Van Leeuwen's Social Semiotics, there's Fairclough's Critical Discourse Analysis, three-dimensional framework. There's Ruth Wodak's discourse historical approach. There's also Van Dijk's socio-cognitive approach. So you can use any of these. As for the code switching, so I think this has to do with the specific context that the code switching occurs in. So, for example, in Morocco, we have code switching between Darija, Moroccan Arabic, and French. So this could signal a hierarchy in terms of these languages. Some people believe or think that French is more prestigious or better in general than Arabic. This choice or this belief stems from a hidden ideology that we can use CDA to uncover.
Thank you, Professor Roukaya. We have another question from Mr. Martou Mohammed Ahmed, who says, does social status affect discourse analysis and ideology? If you would like to provide a feedback, so the floor is open for anyone who wants to react. Okay.
Yeah, I can attempt to. I saw this question earlier, along with another question similar to this, linking social status, linking CDA with objectivity, whether we can remain objective as CDA researchers. Well, I can highlight that it's been explicitly discussed by CDA scholars that objectivity in this field is impossible, because we've been talking about language being ideologically loaded. We are using language, therefore we cannot remain objective. It's also generally used in qualitative research, and here we're not talking about most of us in CDA would use, for example, purposive sampling, which is a non-probabilistic technique. So we're not, this is not math. It's not 1 + 1 = 2. Objectivity is always there, but there is always a way to minimize this. There is, for example, techniques in research like, let's say, data triangulation, where we use multiple types of sources of data. We can be explicit in stating, as a researcher, which theoretical underpinning am I following? Where do I come from as a researcher? I explicitly expose that on my research. So as this, I think his name was Ahmed, asked if social status does affect CDA research. I think it does, because we as researchers cannot remove ourselves from our social sources. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Laila. Don't you think that we can use these frameworks that are related to CDA within the mixed approach research? For example, mixing quantitative and qualitative data collection techniques. For example, if you are analyzing a textbook or trying to evaluate gender representation, for example, in Ticket to English or in Gateway or in Visa and so on, and you can try to count how many times or how many words that mention females within the text in comparison with those that are used to describe males within doing housework, for example. So as researchers, we may try to be more objective. We will not achieve a total objectivity, but we try most time to be close to
minimize it.
Thank you. We have another question. For someone new to critical discourse analysis, what would you say is the most accessible first step or an initial question that they should ask when they want to critically analyze a piece of discourse in their daily life? There is a question that is close to this one. It was proposed by Professor Khaldaoui Mohammed, who says, if language is fraught with bias, stereotypes, and ideologies, how can researchers get rid of their own ideologies when seeking to objectively deconstruct, construct, and present the hidden reality?
I think that this question pours to some extent into the answer provided by my colleague, Professor Laila. So again, here we're talking about subjectivity in quantitative research, which is not a bad thing per se. Unlike quantitative research, where you try to minimize or eliminate this bias completely, qualitative research almost welcomes it. You are always looking at your data through a lens, through your own worldview. So it is unavoidable to approach a certain issue or data with baggage, cultural baggage, ideological baggage, and so on. And Professor Laila has mentioned certain ways in order to minimize this subjectivity. She mentioned triangulation, for example, whether it's data triangulation, theory triangulation, and so on. So yeah, you should always think of your own knowledge as a plus and not something that undermines your research, especially in qualitative research.
Sure, thank you.
If I may, I can add to Dr. Roukaya's answer. The CDA is based on assumptions. And ideology, maybe this is what we call reflexivity in research, reflexivity or positionality, where I acknowledge my cultural background, my ideological background, but it's impossible to detach from one's ideology from one's culture. But as they say, we try to minimize the effect or the influence of our ideology in our analysis of discourse. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for your feedback. Going back to analyzing textbooks, you show how ideology is embedded. Do you see any examples where these texts also contain moments of resistance, or where they accidentally reveal the very ideology that they are trying to promote?
I may attempt to answer this one because my research has to do with textbooks. And I can say that I saw a question saying that, do you think that textbooks reflect Western ideologies, I think? I mean, in Morocco, in the Moroccan context, as I said before, educational discourse, schools, textbooks, they are ideologically loaded, for sure. And there are many ideologies out there that we can try to unmask in these textbooks, for example. And in the Moroccan context, we should keep in mind that we have the public sector and the private sector. And if you try to make the distinction between the two types of textbooks used in both sectors, totally different. I can say that I've worked in the private sector, and I've worked with some of the textbooks used there. They are typically Western. There is nearly no mentioning of the Moroccan culture, and they are directed towards Moroccan students. On the other hand, we have the textbooks used in public schools. For example, the ones you mentioned, Ticket to English, Gateway, Visa to the World, etc., etc. I can say that those two reflect many, many ideologies. They're definitely, they do show instances that they are directed towards Moroccan audiences, Moroccan students. There is Moroccan culture is highlighted, but there are instances of ethnocentric ideologies. There are instances of I don't know, gender inequality, if you want. Many, many ideologies that we can uncover in the textbooks used in Morocco. So yeah, I think that's a very rich field to study.
Thank you. I think sometimes even within this Western text, for example, the text that George Orwell produced, for example, his article, Marrakesh, within this article, if you try to analyze this one, you will find these moments in which George Orwell presents a counter discourse. He was criticizing these people who are walking around Marrakesh, but at a moment he provides this view of resistance from those soldiers who, at a moment, they turned around and they did not obey the orders of the colonizer. Sometimes we may find resistance within the same text. Another question says, how can individuals become more aware of their own unconscious ideological assumptions? How can individuals become more aware of their own unconscious ideological assumptions? Yes.
Yes, first thing that comes to mind is by asking questions, by being critical of everything. Question everything, take nothing for granted. I've made a framework with a bunch of questions that you can ask in order to analyze the actors, the message, the content, how it's presented, and so on. So question, definitely.
Thank you. Professor Roukaya, here is a question that was addressed to you by someone. Does it mean semiotic is used as the main methodology to reach to the conclusion ideology hidden behind the language used? So where does the CDA lie in this process of analysis?
Right. So semiotics, or social semiotics, to be more exact, provides the tools and the framework to examine how meaning is made through signs, linguistic, visual, spatial, etc. It helps uncover how particular choices, for example, color, wording, size, produce certain meanings or associations. CDA, on the other hand, provides the critical lens. The CDA, the critical in CDA is the critical lens, and it asks, why do these meanings matter, and whose interests do they serve? People in power, the elite, and so on. It could connect this to semiotic finance. These semiotic modes to broader issues of power, ideology, and social equality. So they are frameworks that complement each other.
Thank you, Professor Roukaya. How do platforms like Instagram or TikTok, where the visual mode is dominant and the text is often reduced to a caption or hashtag, force us to adopt the frameworks of Chris and Valuin?
So the first example that pops to mind is memes. So memes are everywhere on social media. It is actually what I'm working on. So memes employ visual modes. We have a picture, and it's even a video. So it has sound, music, and so on, and textual mode as well, linguistic mode as well. So they are the perfect mix of these two modes, and we can see how the two work together in order to produce meaning that is again can be ideological. You have memes that can be political, that can be critique, that can critique society, and so on. So perfect example of where we can apply Cressy Van Leuven's visual grammar.
Thank you. There is another follower who is wondering: is there any model that could be used to analyze speech?
If I might,
you mean sounds.
Yes.
Sounds.
So here we're talking about moving images more. So yes, there are frameworks in multimodal discourse analysis that include sound, particularly for video speeches. So talking about multimodal discourse analysis, which examines all modes: speech, voice, music, sounds, visual, gestures, and many. So we can just study each one of them and then try to combine all of them at once, taking like some from each. There is a mode called kineconic mode, which focuses on moving images, which analyze how audio, visual, and gestures combine over time. And there are some studies which also treat music and voice as separate modes, looking at features like tone, pace, volume, pauses, and all of this to analyze what's going on in the video. So yes, there are frameworks for that.
Thank you, Professor Loubna. This question is
comment.
Yeah.
Sorry, if I was just comment on this person's question, Mr. Yusuf. So he says a video speech, for example. So video speech is a linguistic, it's textual in nature. So you can go ahead and transcribe the speech and you can analyze it. You don't even have to analyze it multimodally, if you like. That is an option, but you can treat it using traditional frameworks of analysis. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Just to add to the answer, the problem in the speech analysis or sound analysis is, those extra or meta-linguistic features, like when you talk about intonation, tone, pitch, volume, etc. There becomes like a little bit more difficult to analyze sound speech, actually.
Yeah, thank you. Let's stay with Professor Nassim Mahfoud. Your analysis focuses on the production of media discourse, but how do you think the audience pre-existing beliefs and culture interact with these constructed narratives? Does the power of the discourse depend entirely on the receiver's position or not? Please activate the mic.
Could you repeat the question? I missed the some part.
The question says, how do you think the audience pre-existing beliefs interact with these constructed narratives? For example, do you think this audience just receive the products that media share without any
so maybe the best answer is Stuart Hall's encoding decoding model, where he split audience into three parts. You have the dominant readers, you have opposition readers, and you have negotiated readers. So the best readers are the negotiated readers. I accept what aligns with my values, and I reject what does not. Is that? Yeah, I agree. Is that this kind of reading? Is it the best? Is it better than the other readings? Well, that's a question that needs to be answered, actually. Yeah.
Thank you. We have another. Yeah. Okay.
answer. It's just that when we were talking about critical discourse analysis, one of its primarily goals is to promote critical awareness. So I would critically analyze anything, try to uncover ideology within that, whether it is media, whether it is educational discourse, even daily discourse. Like, that's the aim of CDA. So it's to critically analyze everything and uncover what's implied. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you for your comments. Here is another participant who is wondering about references that you may recommend for researchers or PhD students who are trying to work on these themes. If you have any ideas to guide these students who are wondering about references. Miss.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there are multiple readings that you can consult, but the best options that I can offer is Van Dijk's work produced in 1999 and 2014, Critical Discourse Analysis and Knowledge. Let me just to expand one's knowledge in Van Dijk's particular approach. I also advise and recommend Michael Halliday's work in the 80s, which paves the way for semiotic analysis. And I also recommend Chris and Van Leeuwen's work that started in 2001, and then the updated version was released in 2008. And the latest or the recent version was published in 2023. So these are, I think, some of the most influential references in CDA.
Thank you.
There are also references that are absolutely central in the field of critical discourse analysis. For example, Language and Power by Norman Firkoff. You can't not talk about it. If you want to even take things even further back, you can start with The Origins of Discourse with Michel Foucault in his The Order of Discourse, Archaeology of Knowledge, and so on. So there are plenty of references that you can base your research on.
Sure. Thank you. On behalf of Bitlisaniyat International Academy and the entire organizing committee, I would like to extend our deepest gratitude to our esteemed speakers, Professor Loubna Bouhou, Professor Laila Laajouli, Professor Roukaya Khaldaoui, and Professor Nassim Mahfoud for their excellent and insightful presentations. You have masterfully guided us on a journey from theory to practice, illuminating the critical role of discourse in shaping our understanding of power, ideology, and conflict. We also extend our sincere thanks to Professor Saeed Rafi for his valuable contribution to coordinating this conference. Our attendees also for engaging questions and participants. Your presence has made this dialogue truly international and meaningful. This conference has not only clarified complex theories, but has also perfectly revealed their urgent relevance. To ensure the critical insights we have shared today extended beyond this virtual space, I would like to propose the following recommendations. So we encourage the integration of critical discourse analysis including its multimodal dimension into university curricula, empowering a new generation of students with these analytical tools is critical for fostering critical media literacy and responsible citizenship. We urge a commitment to critical assumptions, as we have seen language and images are never neutral. We recommend that media outlets actively reflect on their framing choices, and that the public consciously engages with diverse sources to deconstruct the narratives presented to them. We strongly recommend fostering more interdisciplinary research that bridges critical discourse analysis with fields like politics, political science, media studies, and digital humanities. The complex challenges of our time require collaboration or collaborative and multifaceted analytical approaches. Let the powerful analysis presented today serve as a call to action. We recommend using this critical awareness not just for academic publication, but as a tool for informed advocacy and for promoting a more nuanced and empathetic public discourse, particularly in times of conflict. In conclusion, before we conclude, any final thoughts for Professor Loubna, Bouhou? Activate the mic, please.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't get your last sentence.
Just any final thoughts? Any?
Okay, I was very happy to join this online conference today, and I hope in the future we'll have more opportunities to participate, share our ideas, and maybe our work, our job, like where we have reached in our research thesis, and maybe some difficulties that we have found, or maybe you can get your ideas and our colleagues' ideas, and maybe ideas from people who attended today. Thank you very much for this opportunity one more time, and I'd like to thank my colleagues for their fruitful presentations too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You are always welcome to participate with us at Bitlisaniyat. It's your first international house, and it is open to all researchers. We can coordinate other scientific events, or we can discuss, we can collaborate on projects. Why not? We may work on a project together and so on. Final words for Laila.
Yeah, thank you. I would like first to thank you, Professor Benaissa, and to thank Saeed Rafi also for helping us coordinate this event. I extend my gratitude to Bitlisaniyat for the opportunity to come here and share our humble experience with knowledge of critical discourse analysis with the audience. So yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Khaldaoui.
I would like to thank you, Professor Benaissa, the organizing committee, Bitlisaniyat, our colleague Saeed Rafi, for all your efforts. This has been a wonderful experience and an opportunity. I do agree with Professor Loubna. We would love to have a sort of event where doctoral students can just discuss their research, exchange ideas, and so on. I think that would be very beneficial. Thank you very much, Professor.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Sure, we can organize a conference that is about research in general, starting from theoretical to methodology to the practical section. Sure, we will organize this. We will communicate and we will coordinate a conference. What about Professor Mahfoud? Any final thoughts?
Thank you so much, Dr. Benaissa. Thank you, presenters, colleagues. Thank you, all those participants and all the audience, who asked questions and who showed interest in CDA. CDA actually needs more work and more work. This is an interdisciplinary field. You can merge it with any other fields, with algorithm, for example, algorithmic visibility, with all other fields. It's interdisciplinary and it needs more work. Thank you so much. Thank you, Saeed Rafi. Thank you, Bitlisaniyat. Thank you so much, and the organizers who have made so much effort to bring this this conference to life. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your insightful and rational ideas. Truly, we enjoyed this your presentation and discussion. So have a good night, everyone. See you, inshallah.
You as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you.